So that said, we welcome you to today's program concerning Andy Detwiler, Pat Detwiler, and now introduce, in addition to Corky and Kylie, who will help her with the program.
Welcome. Hey, here comes family. Thinking there might be a couple more chairs back this way.
Okay.
Now remember, I'm old, so I have to read part of my program. These people talk.
There's 2 seats right
I
there.
got that. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Andy was born on November 24th, 1969, here in Urbana, Mercy Memorial Hospital. And he was a very healthy baby, and he developed as would be expected. However, in August of 1970, he contracted what we thought was just an upset stomach with a low fever. Tom's mother, my husband Tom, stopped in to see how it was going, and we went upstairs to where the crib was, and she said, "Oh, Pat," she said, "I don't like the looks of this at all." She thought that he seemed to have a yellow tone to his skin, and being with him all the time, I hadn't even noticed it. And so I called the doctor, and he told us to bring him in. So I did, and Doc Richards took one look at him, and immediately called Springfield to a pediatrician who said to bring him to the emergency room there. I did so, and after an examination by a doctor and a blood sample evaluated, the doctor told me that he tested positive for bacterial spinal meningitis, the kind that sweeps through large groups in army camps and kills many. The only place we had been was at church. He further noted that if the first antibiotic he would try, and if that would work quickly, he would probably make it through the night. And I about ready to get on the floor right then, because I wouldn't even have probably taken him to the doctor. But if not, he could easily die before another antibiotic could be administered. So, as would have it, an IV was inserted in the top of his forehead, and his arms were tied to the sides of the crib loosely, just so he couldn't grab hold of it. And he was 9 months old, and so he couldn't reach the needle to pull it out. Suffice it to say, we were in a complete panic. However, in the morning, his feet were waving wildly, and he was very unhappy that his arms were tied and constrained. And he was much better. After 2 weeks in the hospital, we brought him home, thinking that this probably would be the worst thing that could ever have happened to him. Little did we know that at age 2.5, he would reach for a sample of grain as it was being transferred from a wagon to an auger that moved grain to the bin. He'd reach for a handful of grain as it fell from the wagon to the auger. He lost his balance, and the auger caught one, then the other arm, and took both of them to the top of the bin. At the same time, a small piece of reinforcement metal on the auger caught his upper lip and cut it from the far left side to the far right side, dropping down over his chin, knocking a tooth out and requiring many, many stitches to close. He never lost consciousness. He walked from where his grandpa had him out by the auger up to the house, and we called the ambulance. Fortunately, our ambulance attendee had had medic experience in Vietnam, and he had him well prepared for the ride to Children's in Columbus. And Dr. Flora had prepared the arms themselves in hopes that they might be reattached. Tom had climbed to the top of the bin in order to reach in and retrieve the arms from the corn. His right arm had been severed at the shoulder, taking his collarbone as well as the whole arm. On his left side, the arm was severed in a clean cut several inches below his shoulder. We prayed that the left arm might be reattached, but it was not to be. Our wonderful surgeon at Children's told us that medicine was 5 years away from reattachments such as this. After extensive surgery, he was placed in intensive care, and believe it or not, he was the healthiest one there, which helped get our feet back on the ground, realizing that at least he was going to live. About 5 days later, he was resting in his hospital crib when he said he was cold. Before I could stand up to cover him, he reached down with his toes, grabbed a corner of the blanket, flipped it up into the air, and it landed perfectly on him. I was flabbergasted, to say the least. But in my heart, I knew that he somehow or other would be all right. As parents, we wanted him to look as normal as possible. So we worked with the Ohio State University and a prosthetics company called Hangers Prosthetics in hope of being able to use his left shoulder to run a prosthetic arm which would have a battery control to use a hook to do schoolwork, etc. But by the time he was in the first grade, he wore the device to school but used his feet to do his work. He became so proficient through trial and error that the prosthesis became a deterrent rather than an aid. So, one day he came home from school, sat down on the floor, reached up with his foot, unstrapped the prosthesis and stated, "It's hot, it gets in my way, and by the time I get the hook in the position it needs to be, and I get my pencil in the pencil holder in the hook, I could have done it with my feet." So there, that was the end of the attempts to look normal and wear a prosthesis. From that time on, he used his feet for everything and got along just fine. The biggest problem he encountered in his young years was the fact that the bone in his left arm continued to grow downward and would actually poke a hole in the end of the skin. And then we would at least once a year have to go to Children's Hospital to have the surgery to shorten the bone so the skin could cover the bone. Finally, it was decided to do a major flesh graft using flesh from his left buttocks to create a pad for the bone to grow into, with the idea that the graft would adhere and grow with the bone. And that seemed to do the trick. And that ended surgery for a few years. At age 3, the Champaign County Cancer Society donated a tricycle to him, which he immediately rode and steered by leaning over and using his left shoulder. He progressed from the tricycle to a big wheel, which he steered and drove only with his feet. Then came a regular two-wheeled bicycle, which he mastered with little difficulty. A couple of years later, he progressed to a motorized Honda three-wheeler and entered the power age of vehicles. Next came a Honda four-wheeler, which he glorified in running fast and furious, scaring his mother half to death. He had a total head mask, which was a horror mask. And he took great fun in wearing that and running the four-wheeler along the right side of the right-of-way of Route 68, going north much faster than he was allowed, and delighted in scaring the drivers on 68 half to death. Fortunately, no bad results came from these angles. We were dairy farmers, and he decided he wanted to show calves at the fair, just like his sister Kathy did. So in the 4th grade, he had his first calf to train. We had a looped strap created that would fit over his shoulder, and with that, off he went into the show ring. He won rookie showmanship that first year for how well his calf behaved. And he and as it performed beautifully for him. He and his sister Kathy continued showing calves, also with brother Matt, until we left dairy. He began saying he wanted to play drum in the band and became very adept at drumming, including tuning the kettle drums for concert band. Our director was bowled over when he saw Andy sitting on a stool with the drumsticks balanced in each foot between his big toe and second toe. No problems. So you see, he was pretty well acclimated to the role of the rest of his friends, even though he did it differently. He wanted to learn to type. And while some scoffed at the idea, he had Mrs. McLaughlin, who said she would take him on in a regular class. He held a pencil between his big toes and second toes, and she taught him with the rest of the students. Even though he adapted a variation, never won a speed contest. FFA was a wonderful outlet for him, and Mr. Conrad never held him back from woodwork projects or any of the projects that he participated in. Graduation day came, and he walked off the platform holding his diploma between his chin and his shoulder and looked over at us and yelled, "It's signed!" Through it all, he was strong, bright, caring, devilish, and ornery, but as dedicated a farmer as the video clips will show. By the way, the childhood prostheses are here on the counter if you'd like to see. And the one thing I would point out is that this was the first one he had. Now, the left side had to be weighted, the right side had to be weighted to counterbalance the left side. See? And so that was hot. He had to wear a t-shirt and it sweat, but this is the one that then, as he got a little larger, and you can look at him if you want to, but so this is the one that he came in and took off and said, "I'm done." Yeah, told me in no uncertain terms. So, let's see, within a few years he moved into his own farmhouse where Corky and Andy lived, and Kylie, and lived on his own until this lovely lady caught his eye. And her name was Corky Ann.
Okay. Yes, poor Pat. Oh, Andy, he's something else, I tell you. For those of you that don't know, Pat was a school teacher. And so teaching was everything to her. And for school for Andy, it was an interruption to his day. He should be at home farming, so I don't know how she survived. I don't know. Because he would tell some stories and I'm like, oh, your poor mom, your poor mom. Okay, well, Andy and we knew each other through friends and stuff like that, so we always knew about each other, but we were two totally different people. He was the daredevil, and I was the one that was always hiding behind my dad and didn't want to talk to anybody. So during school, he was a little bit older than me, so we didn't really have any classes together or anything like that. But he thought I was evil because I didn't speak to anybody, and I thought he was crazy because there wasn't anything he wouldn't do or try. He's just an adrenaline junkie through and through. I mean, he's not afraid of anything. He lived life to the fullest, always, always, always. So when we first started dating, Andy's not really much of a romantic, so how that happened was, my dad's in the military, so my dad would have to go away on the weekends once a month for his drills and stuff like that. Well, my sister and I were home alone, and it was late. It was late one evening, and her bedroom is at opposite ends of the house of mine, and we were sleeping, and we heard something. I heard this horrendous boom outside, And we're like, what in the world? So, you know, we jump up, we meet in the middle of the house, and we're like, what's going on, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know, did you hear that too? Yeah, I heard it. So we're trying to figure out what's going on. Well, then all of a sudden we hear this music. And we're like, what is going on, you know? So we peek through the blind. Well, here comes this pickup truck backing through our yard right up to the front door. And these guys are in there, and they got the music on, and they're laughing and having a good time. And we're like, who is that? So we finally realized it's Andy and a couple of his friends. So we open the door, and we're like, are you guys okay? Like, what's going on? And they're out there laughing, you know, and we're talking back and forth and stuff like that. And his friend finally said, are you going to say anything, or do I have to? So Andy finally said, would you like to go out sometime? And I was like, I'm not so sure about that. But of course I accepted, and we ended up going out on a date, and that turned into a really awesome relationship. So when we first started dating, like I said, Andy's an adrenaline junkie. So he was in demolition derbies. So he would find the perfect car, you know, get the car all ready, and then once he had all the windows out and the engine all perfect and everything wired up and all the things that you have to do to a derby car, then it came my job to get it all lettered up with, you know, his number and his name and hi mom or whatever, you know, we wanted on the car. So he'd do the mechanical stuff, and then I would do the fun stuff, you know, writing on the car and stuff like that. And so he did that for quite a few years, and then he wouldn't wear his seatbelt, because obviously it's not easy for him to get his seatbelt on and off, and he actually had a doctor's note, so he didn't have to wear a seatbelt, because his biggest fear was if he would get into water or his car would catch on fire, he wouldn't be able to get out, and he would either drown or burn to death. And so he had a doctor's note where he didn't have to wear a seatbelt because, you know, it just wasn't feasible for him to get out easily. Well, I finally convinced him. I'm like, honey, you have to wear a seatbelt. You know, you're getting banged around in this car, you're gonna get hurt. You know, you have to wear it. No, I'm not. Well, he finally caved in, so he wore a seatbelt. And he took a screwdriver and he had it wedged in his car so that he could use that screwdriver to get the latch to get out or whatever he needed to. Well, wouldn't it so happen that I made him wear a seatbelt, guess what happens? His car catches on fire. And guess what happened? There went that screwdriver, all that banging around, so he reached for his screwdriver. Guess what? It wasn't there. But luckily, there was plenty of people around in his heat that knew him, and so once they saw that his car was on fire and he wasn't getting out, one of his good friends went over and got him out. So that was the end of the derby, and I'm like, okay, we can't do this anymore. We can't do this anymore. So we went from derbying, and then in 1999, Tom and Pat, Andy, and I ended up buying a lake house together. And even before that, he had boats and different things, you know, and we'd go on vacation, and he'd have these speed boats, and he'd be going so fast, and you'd be out of your seat thinking, oh, I hope I'm going to stay in this boat, you know, because he would just be flying, having a good old time and stuff like that. But then, like I said, in 1999, we bought the lake house. We ended up getting a couple jet skis. Well, here's Andy, no arms, staying on this jet ski, you know, flying all over the lake, and other boaters, you know, when he goes by, they're like, what in the world? You know, I just couldn't believe, you know, that this guy had his feet up on those handlebars and just his tiny little butt on that seat, a wet seat at that, and he was staying on there. If there was a will, there was a way, because he was doing it. So he loved those jet skis, and he rode those things all over the lake all the time. So after that, I told you that he wasn't a romantic. So we dated for several years, did different things, you know, and it was time that he thought it was time to ask the big question. So back when we were younger, the big thing was to go down to Springfield and go to the mall. That's what you did on the weekends. You went down, you walked through the mall, got something to eat, whether it be Casanos or the steakhouse or whatever. So we go down there and walk around the wall, you know, we got something to eat, we finished eating. And he's like, let's go to a jewelry store. I'm like, okay, sounds like fun. So we go in there, and of course he walks right up to the wedding area, the bridal sets, and he was like, what do you like? And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, what do you like? And I'm like, I don't know, you know. He's like, well, let's sit down here. So we sat down, you know, and this nice person came over and started talking to us and stuff like that, you know, and we ended up picking out a nice ring. So of course, you know, it had to be sized and everything, so they kept the ring, you know, and I'm like, oh, I wonder when this is going to happen. You know, I was all excited that I'm going to get married, you know. So they called and said that my ring was ready. So it was time to go back to the mall and pick up my ring. So we go in to pick up my ring, and they show it to us, and I try it on to make sure it fits and everything, you know. We put it back in the box, and he's like, put it on. I'm like, no, that's not how this works. And he's like, just put it on. It looks so pretty, just put it on. And I'm like, okay. So I got this ring on, you know, and we're so happy, and we're walking through the mall. But guess who we run into? We run into his mom and dad. And of course, we were smitten, we were smiling, and they're like, what are you two up to? And then Pat saw my hand, and she's like, oh my goodness, you know, so that's how I got engaged. Andy's many things, but he's not a romantic. So then, you know, we're married and plan the wedding and all that stuff, you know, we go on our honeymoon, have a wonderful time. We went on a cruise to the Bahamas, and it was a great time, you know, and the way they work the cruises and stuff like that is they try to hook you up with other newlyweds and stuff like that. So we met some friends, you know, and everybody accepted Andy and stuff like that, you know, so we had a really good time. Well, we get home, and a couple months go by, and I'm like, so guess what? I'm pregnant. So then comes along this beautiful little lady. So, you know, we're pregnant, and we're happy, we're all excited about everything, you know, and it's getting closer and closer to the due date, you know, and he's like, how am I going to hold the baby? I'm like, we'll figure it out. You always figure everything out. We will figure this out. So the time comes, he's at I think it was some kind of a marketing meeting or something, so he was away for the evening, having dinner and all that stuff, and I'm at home, and he no more than gets home, and I go in, and guess what? Water broke. So I'm sitting there and I yell for him, and I'm like, hey Andy, I think my water broke. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? What are you talking about your water broke? And I'm saying, well, I don't know, because we've never done this before. I said, but it's not stopping, so I'm pretty sure it's water and it's not the other thing. So I think we need to call the doctor. So he gets the phone, you know, we call the doctor, and the doctor like, well, it sounds like your water broke. So Andy, the whole time I was pregnant, you know, he was like, oh, it's no big deal, you know, no big, because everybody's like, are you going to go in the room with her, you know, what's going to happen? He's like, oh yeah, it's like a cow having a calf, no problem, yeah, this is fine, this is fine. So, you know, once I told him the water broke, he's like, oh, you know, a whole different story, you know. And so he's like, okay, we got to go to the hospital. I'm like, okay, so we get everything, you know, we had the bag and everything, get everything in the car. We're backing out, and he's like, you know, freaking out. We go out the driveway, and he's a little shaky and scaring me a little bit. And I finally looked at him, you know, we're on 68 heading towards Springfield, and I'm like, honey, do I need to drive? Are you okay? Because he was just, he didn't know what to do. He was beside himself. He's like, you know, he was nervous. So we get to the hospital, we get inside, you know, and of course, yep, I had to stay. It was time. So we're in there, and Andy's a protector. He is a protector. So we get in there, and everything's going fine, you know, and it comes time, you know, it's starting to get a little worse, a little worse. Well, the nurses started acting funny, and we're trying to figure out, you know, what was going on. Well, come to find out, Kylie was breech, and we didn't know. And one of the nurses was being kind of rough with me, and it was hurting me. And so he was mad, and he told her to get out and don't come back. You know, he was upset with her. He's like, you don't treat my wife like that. You know. So we finally figured out. They did the ultrasound, find out Kylie was breech and all that stuff. You know, so we had to go into. Usually, you get to stay in your room to have the baby, but because of what was going on, they wanted me to have a C-section. Andy and I are both very stubborn people. We're both the middle child. So we're like, we don't want a C-section. You know, if we have a C-section, then somebody's either we're going to have to go stay with somebody, or somebody's going to have to stay with us, because he can't really carry the baby around. I can't carry the baby around, because if you have a C-section, you're not allowed to lift anything. So we're like, we don't want a C-section. What do we do here? And so they got the ultrasound out, figured everything out, and they're like, let's have the baby naturally. So that's what we did. We had the baby naturally. It was a little rough, but it worked out. Yeah. So then it comes time to go home. Well, when your baby's breech, they have to check the hips and all that stuff. So it's time to go home. They want to make sure that she's good, make sure her hips aren't going to pop out or anything like that. So the doctor comes in, and he grabs Kylie. And when you're a breech baby, your legs automatically just come up like this when you're not wrapped in a blanket. So he takes the blanket off. Kylie's hips come up like, or her legs come up like this, and he grabs her legs, And this doctor's pushing on her little legs as hard as he can, and I thought Andy was going to come unglued. He was like, "Get off of my baby!" And he was like, "It's okay." And she wasn't really crying or anything. It must not have been painful. She didn't really cry or anything. And the doctor said, "I have to make sure, that she's okay. We got to make sure that her hips are okay and all that stuff." So he examined her, and everything was good, and here she is. But God works in mysterious ways, because her being breech, she's very flexible like Andy. It's just crazy, because like when we found out she was breech, as we're delivering, we were like, how could a doctor not know? That's probably one of the first things they check or something. Well, she was supposed to be breech. That's what made her flexible like him, so she could do the things that he could do. And so they were two peas in a pod. She clicks her little toes like he does, and they would put their legs up behind their head with their feet behind their head, do all these weird things, just a dad and his daughter doing what they do. So, and if I said, he was worried about how he was going to be able to hold her. Well, after delivery, when they brought her in, he sat on the bed Indian style, and we laid the baby right in his legs, and that's where she laid. She laid right in his legs, and it was just like us, holding a baby, but he was doing it with his legs. And he'd always reach down and rub her little head with his lip and stuff like that. And it was amazing. It was amazing. That's how he put her asleep a lot of the days. So, but yeah, like I said, he's a fierce protector, so he was upset with that nurse because she was making me uncomfortable. And then when the doctor came in and was pushing on her like that, he was like, "We're not having this. We're not having this." So, the next journey in our life was we get home and we're busy doing family life now, and I'm busy with the baby, and I'm like, "Oh, I gotta wash bottles." I'm like, "Can you go wash bottles?" We didn't have a dishwasher. He went out there, he washed bottles one time. He said, "That's enough of that, we're going to town." So we got a dishwasher. So that was fun too, but yeah. And then we were very fortunate too, because he was like, "I'm not changing any diapers. I'm not changing any diapers." Well, Kathy at the time lived right across the field from us. So if I had to go away and leave Andy and Kylie alone, he was lucky enough he could call Kathy and go, "Can you come over and change my diaper?" So yeah. And Andy he is so good with all the kids. Kids just attract to him, and I don't know why or anything like that, but he was so good with all of our nieces and nephews. And my sister's kids, my niece is the same age as Kylie, so we were all really close and stuff like that. And the kids would always need the time to learn how to tie your shoes. Well, Andy does everything so intricately. He taught all the kids how to tie their shoe. I mean, in no time. I mean, the way he did things, he just, taught them how to tie their shoes in no time. Just because the way he would do it and how patient he was, and they just, "Oh, that's how you do it." So I mean, he was so close to all the kids on both sides of the family. And it's funny because Uncle Andy is Uncle Andy, and even I think as someone that grew up with Andy, we didn't look at him as being different or anything. It was just Andy. It's just the way it is. But like the nieces and nephews, they wouldn't even realize that Andy didn't have arms until they were like 5, 6, 7 years old. But one day they would be like, "Uncle Andy doesn't have any arms." Just because we do our thing, and they didn't even dawn on them. It was Uncle Andy. And then as they got older, they're like, "Wait a minute, Uncle Andy's different." So it's just amazing, how the kids adapt and things like that.
Well, be sure and tell them about how he picked her up.
Yes. Well, as Kylie got older, when she was a baby, I always worked outside of the home. So I would get her ready in the morning, and then I would take her to the sitters. And then as she got older, he wanted to help with different things and stuff like that. So I was talking about when he'd race up and down 68, yeah.
Yeah, ask Cannon. I have to have the closet closed to go to sleep.
Oh, goodness.
Why'd you leave that open?
Oh, yeah. Well, Christmas was Andy's favorite holiday. Andy loved Christmas. And so we would always try to decorate the house up as best as we can, you know, all these lights and stuff like that. So when she was younger, I'd be outside, you know, getting the lights up and stuff like that, and he'd be helping. And the way he would help, he would be on one of his toys, doing donuts in the snow or the gravel or whatever. Oh, honey, do you need me to go get you something? Okay, hang on a second, I gotta go over here and I gotta go over here, you know, playing on his little toys and stuff like that, you know, but he was always out there with me, but I don't know how much help he was. Christmas was his favorite holiday, and we still deck the house out for Andy. His birthday, like Pat said at the beginning, is November 24th, so on the evening of November 24th, we try to turn our outside lights on in honor of Andy, so. But that was, yeah, he is a Christmas guy. That was his holiday. His second favorite holiday is Labor Day. For any of you around here that know about Labor Day in West Liberty,
Oh, yeah.
it's a tractor fest. And that was his jam. He loved Labor Day. Anything to do with tractors, he was there. And actually he bought his first tractor, I think he was 8 to 10 years old. He bought a John Deere H, like a 1940s John Deere H. We still have that. That was his baby. Then he went on to different things. He had some other different tractors. Then he'd buy a big old army truck, come home with a big army truck, and he'd drive that around for a little bit. Then he'd sell that. One day he came home with a big old bulldozer. He said, I might need to do something with this. So he comes home with this big bulldozer. But yeah, there was a will, there was a way. Andy was going to figure out how he was going to run it and what he was going to do with it. So he had some quite interesting vehicles along the way. Fire truck, yep. He somehow came across, was that a 1916? It was West Liberty's very first tanker truck, right?
29, I think.
Was it?
TT.
Yeah. It was their very first Model T fire truck. He found this somehow.
Jeff knows about that.
Yeah. Do you remember what that was?
It was a Model T Ford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we went down to Hamilton, Ohio, is that where we went? We went down to Hamilton and got the West Liberty's very first fire truck and brought it back to town. And we owned it for a while, and it's actually up at the Logan County Historical Society now. When we were finished with it, that's where that went. But we put it in a lot of parades, and Andy's good friend sitting back there, he was in a lot of parades with us. We had a lot of fun in that fire truck. Oh, goodness. Okay, and then Andy's next favorite thing would be fair. When, like Pat said, he was in 4-H when he was younger, and then it came time for Kylie to be 4-H age, and he wanted Kylie. I said, well, what are we going to do? You know, what is she going to show? And he's like, I think I want her to show steers. I said, okay. She's tiny. She was like 40 pounds dripping wet, and he's like, I think she should show steers. And I'm like, oh, goodness, you know, but I trust him. He's never led us wrong, you know. He's the mighty protector. We're going to do this. Guess what? We missed the deadline. We missed the deadline for the steer, so we didn't get a steer. So he said, well, now what are we going to do? And I was like, why don't you go over to Don Barger's and ask him about them goats? Maybe we should check into, you know, those little goats. They're pretty cute, you know.
And we had goats. We had 3
Yeah,
goats.
when Kylie was little, we always had to go down to Young's Dairy and feed the goats. And so we had
Got sick of that.
that got kind of expensive, so we ended up buying a few of our own, and so we had a few goats at home. But yeah, so then when we missed the deadline for her to have a steer at the fair, we ended up going to the neighbor's house and talking about goats. Well, the goats went awry.
Yeah.
We started out with 2 and turned into like 70. So, but it was so fun. Oh my gosh, the memories that we made, and I'm sure all of you that have been in 4-H or anything like that, you know, the memories that you make with your children doing stuff like that is just unbelievable. And when Andy does something, he does it right. And so when she started showing goats, we ended up getting a really good bloodline. We worked with the neighbor, and between the neighbor and us, we came up with a really good bloodline, and we started showing nationally. We went all over the United States showing and stuff. And so that was another blessing, you know, that we got to do that together. It was a lot of fun. So she won a lot at state fairs. She won a lot at national shows. She, you know, did a lot of stuff like that. You know, and of course it's a family thing, you know. I mean, he had his process, I had my process, you know, and we worked together and got everything ready for the shows and stuff like that. So that was a lot of good memories for us. Well, about Kylie was a junior, and she was like I'm bored with the goats. So guess what we got? We got a beef steer. But that's okay. She's 18 by now. She's not 40 pounds. She's a big girl. She's a farm kid. She can handle this steer. I'm like, hey, I'm okay with that. Till the feed bill came. Holy moly.
No doubt.
So the last 2 years, Andy was excited because she did show steers and she did really well. We try to be conservative. We try. 4-H is supposed to be a learning thing. Finances and all that kind of stuff. So we didn't go out and go hog wild crazy or anything like that. But she put the work in, and she did really well. She got reserve cattlemen's the first year, and that was exciting because Andy's cousin Todd, we got his herdsman award. So that was really exciting for us, And then the second year she did real respectable, and then that was the end of Kylie's 4-H. So then, Andy loving fair, next journey. I think I'm gonna run for fair board. Why? That's a lot of drama. Do you know what we went through at fair with that fair board? Like, why would you do that? And he's like, because, I think we need to learn behind the scenes. We need to figure this out. So Andy runs for fair board.
You couldn't give it up is what it was.
Yeah, he loved fair. So he ran for fair board. He got on the fair board, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and you learned so much about behind the scenes and stuff like that. And just Andy as a person, since he loved fair, he with his YouTube channel and stuff like that, he put all that stuff on there, just to kind of promote. This is what it takes. It's not just go to the fair, have fun, go home. There's a lot that goes into that. And so he learned so much from that, and he really, really enjoyed being on the fair board. So, and then with that, goes into his YouTube channel. Andy was being sick one day, and his friends had talked about YouTube and stuff like that, and he really didn't know what it was. So when he was sick at home one day on the couch, he was like, "I'll figure out this YouTube thing, So he figures out how to get it on the TV, and of course, what's he search? Farming. So here we are watching all these farming videos. TV was over, it was YouTube now, and we watch farming 24/7. Which was fine, because he loved it, it made him happy, so it made us happy. So Kylie and I are like, you can do that. You can make these videos. Oh, I'm not doing that.
Oh no, nobody would watch me. No. What would they watch me for?
And his poor mother has always said, Andy, you need to write a book. You really need to write a book. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. So, guess what? YouTube was Andy's book. Because he started that in November of 2018. And by mid-2019, he probably had, 30,000 followers?
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah, people wanted to watch Andy. He had a story to tell, and he was telling it. And with that being said, he went a big farm machinery show in Louisville. He went, I think that following year. I think that was in 2019. He went went every year, but now he had this YouTube channel, so he's walking around, with his camera in his pocket. And I think you were with him, weren't you? Did you go when?
I don't think I was there that year.
Okay. She wasn't there, but he had his, his camera in his pocket. He's walking around filming everything, because he could put his camera in his pocket and it just fit in there perfectly. So as he's walking, he's videoing everything.
He could turn it on and off with his mouth.
Yeah, yeah. So he's walking around the farm machinery show, and people start recognizing him, and they're like, "Hey, you're that guy, And so he really.
He's like, "What the heck?"
Yeah, we're not the kind of people that like to be the center of attention. We like to sit in the corner and watch everybody else, So, he went there, and people started recognizing him and stuff like that, and then his channel really blew up, and he started getting some pretty amazing comments from people from all over the world, countries we've never even heard of, and I remember him coming to me one day, and he said, "Honey, I gotta read you this." And so he read me this comment, and it was from a guy that was contemplating suicide. And he said, I was going to end my life until I found you. He said, he said, I thought my life was horrible. He said, and then I found your videos. He said, if you can do it, I can do it. He said, what do I say? What do I say to that? And I said, I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, what do you say? What do you say like that? Andy he's on it. And he wrote back to this guy, and it was the most beautiful thing. I wish I would have brought it, but it was the most beautiful message I've ever heard. And he said, where there's a will, there's a way. And Andy was a big guy, but everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a purpose. We just have to find it. You have to find your purpose, and it takes a long time to find that purpose. Because like I said, Pat was like, you have a story that needs to be told. You need to write a book. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that, So Andy found his purpose through YouTube, and he had a huge following, and he commented on every single comment. Every single comment. And I mean, there's millions. Whether it just be a heart, or when he would read one like I just told you, where the guy said, I was contemplating suicide until I found you. And he wrote this big, long comment back to this guy, which, I'm sure helped the guy tremendously. And that wasn't the only one. Another guy commented and said, you're probably going to not like what I have to say, but I'm into drugs and this, that, and the other, and I just don't know what to do with my life. And Andy he said the right thing to all those people. I mean, it was just so heartfelt and so true and real. And he just helped so many people. And that's when he realized, he found his purpose. And so we have so many projects going on now because since Andy passed, which is unbelievable, Andy is a survivor. And when he got sick with cancer, we went through all the treatments and everything, did all that stuff. He never, ever complained. He just, it's part of life. This is what we got to do, and we did it. And of course, we found out about cancer at the same time COVID came around. So his first treatments, I wasn't even allowed to go in with him, which was horrible because we do everything together. So we would take him to the hospital, and luckily we were in Springfield, and where they do their treatments and stuff, it's all glass windows. So he would go in and sit in a chair. Kylie and I parked right outside the window.
We'd sit in the car for 5 hours.
5 hours. We'd be there for 5 hours. But he could see us and we could see him, and it made us happy. And it got us through it.
It is what it is.
It is what it is what he always says, yes. It is what it is. And luckily, because all the things that Andy went through when he lost his arms, the doctors would always tell him, oh, it won't hurt, giving him a shot and stuff like that. Andy hated doctors. Andy hated shots, because it did hurt. They always lied to me. I don't want any part of that. And so he played football when he was in junior high, so I think he had to get a physical for that. But he would not go to the doctor. He would not go to the doctor. And then he was doing one of his projects. I don't even remember what he was doing, but he was using a torch, and he didn't have glasses on. So he burned his eyes really, really bad. And he came in one night because he'd worked in the shop all day, using this torch and doing whatever he was doing. Probably a derby car, who knows. But he came in and his eyes were red, and it hurt him so bad. I'm not going to the doctor. I'm not going to the hospital. I'm like, honey, you can't even sleep. You can't rest. You can't do anything. I said, we have to do something. Well, we have, thankfully, a lot of friends, that are in the medical field. So I get on the phone. Hey, Dana, this is what Andy did. What do we do? Put potatoes on his eyes. Slice up a potato. I put potatoes on his eyes. We're just trying to figure all this stuff out. And it wasn't working. So he finally decided, okay, fine, I'll go to the emergency room. So we go to the emergency room, and they want to give him tetanus shot because, your eyes can get infected pretty darn fast. You're not giving me a tetanus. Don't touch me. So they put some numbing drops in his eyes. He was happy, and they took care of him, and we went home. But he was terrified. And then some other things that happened was, Pat said, when he had his accident, he lost that tooth. Well, it also damaged his adult tooth. Like when it hit his lip, it had damaged his adult tooth also, but he didn't like the dentist either. Well, one day he He dressed himself. Everybody always wants to know, what do you have to do? What do you have to help him with? I didn't have to help Andy with anything. The only thing Andy could not do was tuck his shirt in and climb up a straight ladder. He lived on his own. He did everything on his own. There's nothing that he could not do. I didn't have to hardly help him with anything. The only thing I would have to help him do was tuck his shirt in, because he figured out how to do everything else. But one day he wears flannel shirts, and he bent down to put his flannel shirt on. But when he went to raise up, he had it in his mouth, because I think he was picking it up off the floor to put it on. Well, he didn't realize he was standing on the sleeve. So when he came up, yeah, there went that tooth. It had, you know, a bad spot in it. So when he came up, that tooth broke off. He was so embarrassed. He smiled at me, you know, here he's got this broken tooth, and I was like, guess what?
That's nice.
You're going to have to go to the dentist now. So we called around, and I always went to the dentist in West Liberty because you know, that's where we're from. So Dr. Anderson was the doctor at the time, and I called and I was like, would you be able to see Andy? And so he's like, oh yeah, I can do that. You know, they got him in, and he goes in there, and he's sitting in the chair, and Dr. Anderson comes in, and he looks at Dr. Anderson. He said, I just want you to know, I can kick above my head. Dr. Anderson's like, I hope you don't have to. I promise I'm not going to try to hurt you. But he examined him, you know, and stuff like that, and he was astounded by the roots of Andy's teeth. He said, I hope we never have to pull your tooth. He said, your roots go to your brain. But as you'll see in some of these videos, Andy used his mouth for a lot of stuff to pick up heavy stuff, and like, you know, your body adapts, you know. And so luckily they just had to drill a hole, put a rod in there, and then screwed his new tooth on there, and it broke him another time when we were at state fairs, and he's like, I gotta go to the dentist. And thank goodness Dr. Anderson had an office over in Columbus.
Metal prods, you know.
He just had this metal thing sticking down. So thank goodness Dr. Anderson got him in right away, and glued it together for the weekend or whatever we were at state fair, and then made an appointment to get permanently fixed. But yeah, so. But anyway, I'm off track here. Where am I going? But yeah, YouTube was Andy's purpose. And like I said, we have a bunch of stuff going on right now because Andy helped so many people. And we truly believe that he can continue to help people. He, thank goodness he has those videos, and we can continue to keep sharing that with people. And we're doing a statue there in West Liberty now where he's going to be standing watching over his crops. And hopefully, you know, as people go by, they'll be curious to see what that's about. And if they're having a bad day, they can bring up his YouTube channel, you know, and see that if there's a will, there's a way. And everybody has a purpose.
Amen, Corky.
That's right. So that's where we're at. And when Andy got sick, that's what we were talking about. COVID and cancer, we did all the treatments, we got through all that stuff, you know. And he got weak, you know. He got rid of the cancer, it came back, you know, and he started to get weak. But, you know, it happens. That stuff's hard on you, you know. It's hard to bounce back from that. And so it was warm out, it was in the summer, it was September, the Friday before he passed. Kylie and Andy, I think, hauled 3 loads of grain to town that day, and he was in the semi, driving the semi, taking care of it, and he was so excited, you know, because harvest was coming, and he was weak, and so when he realized, I just hauled 3 loads of corn to town, I'm good, I'm ready for harvest. So he was really excited about harvest. We had a fun day on Saturday. Sunday we were up at the lake, Tom and Pat, Andy and I were out on the boat having a good time. And Monday rolled around and Andy had a cough. And I was like, ooh, that doesn't sound very good. I said, we need to go to the emergency room. I'm not going to the emergency room. So I was like, okay. Tuesday I came home, the cough was even worse. And I was like, we're going to the emergency room. And he said, we are going to the emergency room. And I knew right then and there we're in trouble. So we head into the emergency room. I said, I'm pretty sure he has pneumonia. And they said, okay, we'll check it out, you know. So they take his blood and do all the kind of stuff they do. They came in and they're like, yep, he's got pneumonia. We're going to get that started, get a treatment started for that. And we're like, okay, we can do this. And then she comes in and she's like, well, we got some more results back. And his sugar was clear down to 37. we're like 37, and Kylie's husband, Cannon, is a type 1 diabetic, so we know quite a bit about diabetes and your sugar levels and stuff like that, and 37 is like comatose, like that's bad. So she came in with this big 60cc syringe of glucose or whatever that stuff is they give you for low sugar, and she pumped that right into his, he had a port, you know, because of the cancer and stuff, and she pumped that right into his system, and within 10 minutes his color was there, he was back to being Andy, he looked good, he felt good. And he's like, man, I feel so much better. And I'm like, you look great. You know, we're like, whew, dodged another bullet here, you know. And so we're sitting there talking, and the nurse comes in, and she's like, who are you? You know, because he looked so much better. He just was Andy again. He had energy, he had color, he had pep, you know. And she was like, oh my gosh, you look great. And he's like, oh, I feel so much better. And she's like, that's what we're talking about, you know. So we were all excited, you know, we dodged this bullet, and we're going to get out of this hospital, and we're going home. Well, within the hour, he sat up in bed and was like gasping for air, and which he'll do that. Because like he'll get a Charlie horse or something like that, and he'll be like, ooh, you know, and I'll rub, I'm like, where's it at? What hurts? You know, what hurts? And I'll rub his leg or whatever like that, you know. This wasn't a Charlie horse. I don't know what went wrong, but something went wrong, and he couldn't catch his breath, so I had to go get the nurses and everything, and they came in, and I was at. And when we went to the hospital, you know, I said, you want to call your mom and dad? You know, what do you want to do? And he's like, no, let's not worry anybody. Let's just figure out what's going on, you know. So we got in there. We found out he had pneumonia. So we called Tom Patson. You know, we're at the hospital. He's got pneumonia. You know, but he's feeling better, so we're going to be good. Well, and unfortunately, I had to call back and say, you need to get here. So. And it's unbelievable, you know, because he's such a survivor. And when he bounced back after she gave him that glucose and everything, you know, we were like, yes, we're out of here. And then the unthinkable happened. So here we are today, sharing his story, keeping him alive, because we know that he's got so much more to do. So, thank you for coming. And I forgot Kylie's part.
Well, my part's easy. But
We have some clips of the different things that Andy can do. And if anybody has any questions, and if anybody has any stories, if you want to share. Yeah, they will.
Okay,
Yeah,
some
they
people
will.
have a hard time watching.
Yeah, they'll get there. So if anyone has any stories, you know, we'll open it up, because I see a lot of familiar faces. So if anyone wants to say anything or share anything.
I'm gonna have to figure out the problem. Oh no, it's been over here.
Well, we start harvest here, end of the week, if not, again, next week.
You guys
We're
hear
gonna
it?
get the grain cart hooked up. We'll see if we backed up far enough.
Hooking up the grain cart seems to be what people talk about the most, because if you've ever done it, it's not an easy task. It's actually funny, for his funeral, we wanted to get out all the farm equipment, and it took 3 men to hook up the grain cart, when Dad does it by himself.
Balance me that. Alright, you guys saw me hook up the power shaft on the auger. This one's about 3 times as heavy, maybe more than that. It goes in here on this big shaft right here. So we got to get it over here on my side. And it's heavy. Hope I don't knock the camera over trying to get it. Set it up there like that. Got sweat in my eyes. Now when the tractor's shut off, you can turn this shaft by hand. So hopefully, I'll be able to get it on there. There it is. Got the happy one now.
Now this next one, I just sort of wanted to throw in. This is him doing it again, but this was his last harvest. And you can tell he's lost a lot of weight, and that fanny pack that he has on is actually a chemo pump.
And this thing
So
is
he's
heavy.
being administered with chemo right now, but it never stopped him. And it's also times like this when we'd get comments on the videos complaining about me not helping. I would get some pretty nasty comments. Why are you just holding the camera? Get in there and help him. I'm like, he knows how to ask for help. If I just stepped in there and did it for him, he would be so angry.
Just like, then there's a collar you pull back, push it on. There it is.
All right. Chemo pump and everything.
What's that?
Chemo pump and everything.
Alright guys, I probably shouldn't even show you this. I'll show you how I pick this bale of hay up. And one thing I'm going to stress to you is don't do it. I've done this all my life and I kind of know the best way to use my mouth on stuff like this. So I'm going to get 2 bales. I'm going to put them here in the back of my truck. And like I say, don't try this.
And that's hay, not straws. The hay is a lot heavier than straw.
One thing that I do not like to do is pick one up off the floor. I can do it. I can roll bales up and get them too high, and then I can pick it up a lot easier. But we got bales right here that are 1 up, so we're good on there. I'm going to get 1 more. Now, when I do pick these bales up, the way I place them in my mouth is key. And I don't know if you noticed, but I'm using my shoulder also and my belly to help pick these bales up. So it's not all with my mouth, although it can be done with just my mouth. I'm going to get this next one right here. Pay attention. You might not be able to see it, but my left shoulder and my belly, and even my phone in my pocket and all that, aids
God gave him in his teeth. Yeah.
The first time I saw him do that, I was so mad at him.
A lot of people talk about this video too. And that impact is not light, it's heavy.
That's nice. These nuts have some type of covering on them, some cap over them, and they're all cracked. This one right here, it's all screwed up. So I gotta find something to pound the socket onto it. This we use the head shear.
That thing's heavy.
Yeah.
That's hammer.
Yeah. Sledgehammer.
Stuck on there.
Now, this was a huge project. We had to, he bought an 856 International, and we had to split it and change the clutch. And this is hard steel. These are heavy.
Clean things up here just a little bit.
There you are, once again, just sit there.
Yep. I'll take it on my phone. At the time, I hated this tractor. I did not want to work on it anymore, but we had a lot of fun.
There she is.
Oh, she does do something. And his fine motor skills with those big fat toes was just amazing.
Completed. Alright, there's several
This
things
one's Grandma's
that
favorite.
possibly happen here, and if they do happen, I hope to get them on camera, you know, so you can see just how things normally go on the farm. The first thing that could possibly happen is I slide off the side of this truck and rust my hind end down there on the ground. The second possible thing that could happen is I pick this gas can up and set it up here on the hood of the tractor, and it slides off and falls on the ground and busts the spout off.
and all the gas runs out before I get down there to get it picked up. Third thing that could happen is I just make a big mess all over the hood of the tractor, which it's happened before. And it's probably going to happen this time. As you can see, I've got the pickup truck backed up here beside the Oliver here that you're sitting on the front of there. And right here is where we put the fuel in. We get that in. That way we can drop the lid. Hey, we're going to set it down here in the truck to see how we do here.
And he uses his sleeves a lot. So people always ask, why don't you tuck those away? Don't they get in your way? But he used them. They were like tools.
Correct. See what I mean about how it can fall off and break the nozzle off, or how I can fall off, or pull one of my teeth out picking this up. The way we did it. Well, I got a feeling everything's going to go well here. Still got the lid, don't want to lose that. We'll move you guys. Alright. So far we've not fallen off. We haven't dropped the gas can, but
His balance is incredible.
You guys see that?
There was a look. And then there's that smile again.
yes, I just about said cuss words right here. Y'all make some place things, yeah. I didn't spell a drop. That's a big deal for me. Especially on camera. Kind of made an uneventful mood, didn't it? I'm going to go ahead and take this as a win for me. See? Coming out. I don't know if you saw that, but I just about busted. Let's see if we can get it to start.
This is an original tractor. It's not. Me and his grandpa bought that tractor. Brand new. He loved that tractor. That's it.
We will take a few questions if anyone wants to know anything. I remember one time, he was probably third, fourth grade. He made me so mad. I went out to get a stick. I was gonna beat the shit out of him.
Whoa,
And he started running. And I chased him all over that yard with that stick. And he's looking back and just laughing at me the whole time. And finally, I just fell down. I was done. And then he came over and lay down beside me. I said, no, you didn't really want to hit me.
I was telling you about, how Andy felt about doctors and stuff like that. Well, unfortunately, when Kylie was little, she got really sick also. She came down with this thing called HSP, called Henlock Schonlein Fahura. Rare. They don't know anything about it. They don't know what causes it, but she was miserable. Couldn't walk. Her head swelled up. The way the doctor explained it, it's almost like pediatric arthritis, severe arthritis. And so she just laid in bed miserable. But when she would start to get better, she couldn't walk still because her feet and joints and stuff were hurting. So you want to tell the story how Dad would make it fun for you?
She'd push me around in the computer chair.
Yeah. And she just loved it, because he knew, how scary it was for doctors and stuff like that. So he just tried to make her sickness a little more enjoyable. It was just some kind of virus that she had to grow out of, and she ended up getting it like 3 different times. And but he tried, he knew what it was like to be sick and in pain and stuff like that. So he'd always try different things to try to take her mind off of it and make her feel better. And they would laugh. He'd be running through the house, pushing her around in this computer chair, turning her around and all that stuff. Just trying to make it better for her.
Let's tell a story here.
All right.
I haven't practiced this, so God only knows how it's going to come out. My husband worked with Lions Club at the Fairgate for many years, and he did not know Andy Detwiler from anybody. But the truck pulled up one day at the Fairgate, and he asked if this man was one of the people who had something to show at the fair, or whether he was buying a ticket. And Andy at that point in time said he was buying a ticket. So the next thing my husband knew, not knowing Andy, this foot came out of the window of the truck with his money for the fair ticket in it. And my husband, if he'd had false teeth, he would have lost them right there. But anyway, that was how he met Andy Detwiler.
Anyone else?
Sorry. I don't need that, Pat. I'm allowed one in the back, girl.
Andy truly was an amazing man. When Corky talks about him loving kids, he truly did. My son Christian, he has Down syndrome, and he would mock Andy like no other with his nasty feet. Christian would sit there, take his shoes off, and he would just mimic whatever Andy would do. We'd go home, he would do it. We'd be in the car, he would take his glasses off with his feet. Mind you, Christian has a big belly. Sometimes he had to lift his leg up to get it up there to do what Andy did. But he did. And Corky gave Christian this jacket when Andy started to lose all of his weight. And Christian wears it every single day because it's Andy's jacket and it's nice and comfy. Even in the winter time, you gotta throw a damn hoodie underneath it because he doesn't want to wear a different jacket. And I am so proud of you girls, the way you're carrying on Andy, because it was true love for you. And we all know how much you love him and how much he loves you.
This is just a little story about Andy when he was in the hospital right after the accident. My mother went to visit him, and his room apparently had a lot of stuffed animals that people had brought to him. And she visited for a while, and then she left. And on her way out of the hospital, she said, "That's a little farm boy. He needs a tractor." So she went and bought him a little John Deere tractor and went right back to the hospital and plunked it down in the bed, and he immediately started to push it around with his feet. When he was awarded Farmer of the Year by Rotary, and I went up to congratulate him. I said, I wish my mother were still living and could see you driving big John Deere tractors. And he made the comment that I think he still has that little tractor that she gave him.
This goes back to fair days. I told the family this back at the viewing, but I was about a junior or senior, which put Andy, he's probably about in junior high. And I'm down there sitting on the show boxes. I was in FFA, so I was at the edge of their club. And I'm just sitting there, and all of a sudden I see Andy come in red. I mean, there's these 3 boys following him. I don't remember the boys. They're just following him and hackling him and giving him a hard time. And Andy comes in there, grabs a pitchfork, slipping snot between his, between his chin and his shoulder, takes off, and then 3 boys took off running like a bunch of girls screaming. And I don't know who caught him. I don't even know where Tom. I don't even know if John was maybe there at the time, but somebody caught him before he did any damage. I just never forget them boys running out screaming like girls. But the last one, Kylie won with him, but I'm there in the truck by the old cemetery down from the house, and Corky and Andy go by, and they kind of stop, and he wondered what I was doing. I said, well, it was this little dog. It's like, been out, 2 months, and they full burrs. I couldn't get it. Every time I pulled the truck, I'd go in my truck. So I finally pulled the truck up. Andy sits right down on the road, gets patting it with his feet. And that dog, Corky can tell you, stayed right there with Andy. Did not move. So I got one of my jackets. Andy got her calmed down. I said, all right, Andy, I'm going to grab her. Grabbed her and took her over to Barely Used Pets. And because I called Jared, I said, Jared, I got a dog coming. I told her how Andy caught it. And I got hold of it, took it over there, and they got her all cleaned up, and then it ended up being Jared's dog. One of the Jared.
Anyone else? Okay. We want to thank you all from the bottoms of our hearts for sticking with us, being part of our family for many years. The town of West Liberty and the town of Urbana bent over backwards to help us. There couldn't have been any better place for an accident like this to take place than here.
Our appreciation for today's program. Everybody come back next month.
Jay Creeley wants to make it now.
Well, you asked me. So, Mike is here, stand up Mike, and of course, Tom and his uncle are here, so anyway, we're putting together a sculpture, and we're only about a quarter of the way there. Get it done, and the sculpture is done, almost. It hasn't been posted yet. The thing, you touched on it, I got to write a little story about Andy, and I was privileged to be able to do that. The thing that is really, really important, I've talked to literally hundreds of people from the YouTube videos, the impression and the inspiration that Andy gave to people is just something to behold. And people need to know that story. It's not just about Andy and the matter-of-fact way his family goes about it, but the inspiration that he gives to millions of people when they watch that. And so that's why this sculpture is going up, because people drive by and they see that and like, why is there a sculpture in the middle of a cornfield? People are going to ask that question. And we're going to get there. But I've got a couple of flyers here to pass out, and I think everybody got one. But anyway, so that's all I got to say about that.
Well, and he illustrated the book beautifully.
Yeah.
If you have any extras, pass them back. Thank you.
Dave came to us, how long ago has it been now? A year?
Well, I came and it bothered me, so I did a little sketch of Andy and brought it out as as a condolence card, and Kathy was there, and she said, we need to write a book about Andy. And I went away and I got to thinking about it, and some told me that that's what we needed to do, so that's what we did. So,
You can get if you're interested in a book, they're $30. Dave has some at his studio, Kylie has some Corky has some at their house. I have a couple at my house, but.
and we've got some, if you want to get one, that's fine. I can do a credit card, or you can pay it in cash, how you want to do it.
Get a couple if they want one now.
Yeah, if anyone wanted one today, they're right here. Anything else? Kathy, if I missed anything that you can think of? Tom? Pay attention. Anything you can think of that you want to add to anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Good seeing you. Good seeing you, Patty.